Hello and welcome to the Property Experts Show with me, Ben Richards, and my business partner, Jack Jiggins. We're here every week, hopefully giving you the highs and lows and insights into our business ventures and property developments. We've got a jam-packed agenda today, and I'm going to be talking through the following. For those of you listening and can't see the screen on podcast, it's the 26th of April, 2024, and we're going to be talking through this. So what should I be paying for utilities connections? We've got 5 projects on the go at the moment. So we've got a good insight into kind of the intricacies of utilities connections. Going to be giving you some hard and fast facts of what we're paying for gas, electric, water, OpenReach, etc. Jack's heading to UKREiiF. And we're going to be talking about that exhibition up in, where is it, Jack?
Leeds.
In Leeds. I'm going to be the expert in the corner next week, and stay tuned to find out a little bit more about that. We've been doing some filming this week, and we're going to be talking about why we're doing that and what it's for. Quite interesting, something we've not done before, but super excited to be sharing that. What we're doing at Sunset at St Andrew's Court in Thame to sell our units faster. So if you're coming up to a busy period of selling assets, selling properties, hopefully these tips and tricks will help you. Internal meetings, when to do them and why. Last night, I had the pleasure of speaking at the Brendan Quinn Central London Property Network about heritage assets, and I'm going to be giving you a whistle-stop tour of what a heritage asset is and what to look out for on those. Jack's going to be giving you some property finance 101 tips, so really kind of great high-level insight into how development funding, bridging funding works on your development sites. And then what to actually discuss when entering a JV. We've raised £14 million in JV equity partnerships over the last 5 years. So we think we kind of know what should be in those JV agreements and what shouldn't be. And we're going to be talking you through our thoughts on that. And then finally, we got planning approval, which we talked about last week, on some external works at St Andrew's Court in Thame. And I'm going to be talking through a little bit more in detail what phase 2 of that process is, what we're hoping to achieve for the rest of the site, and giving you a bit of a deep dive insight. And as always, Q&A at the end. If you've got any questions, please do drop them in the comments throughout this show, and we will hopefully get back to them either at the end of the show or after. And maybe we could bring up the questions next week and answer anything that we couldn't answer this week. So let's jump in.
With the very exciting utility connections.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite dull. It's quite dry, but I guarantee there'll be a lot of people out there that are factoring in not enough to these utility connections and making wild assumptions that they get the quotes back and they fall off their chair and they can't understand why. And I just wanted to give people an insight into what we're paying. I've got 3 of our projects up on the screen. I've got our St Andrew's Court Thame project, which is currently 9 units. West Street Marlow, which is an 8-unit conversion. And then we've got Colney Hatch Lane in Muswell Hill, which is a further 9 units. And for those listening on the podcast, there's a table of all of these costs for gas, electric, water, and OpenReach. So let's start with kind of Thame. The gas connection costs on that is £4,500. Electric is £4,200. Our water connections are going to be £18,000, and our OpenReach is actually TBC at the moment, just waiting for those quotes. West Street Marlow, £7,000 for gas, £13,500 for electric, £22,000 for water. And then Muswell Hill, Colney Hatch Lane, £20,000 for new gas connections, £18,500 for new electrical connections, £28,000 for water, and £12,000 for OpenReach, for about 80 grand for that whole project. So massive, massive outlay. And you might be thinking, well, that's quite a, Thame is only 9 units, Colney Hatch is only 9 units. Why is it £25,000 for Thame and £80,000 for Colney Hatch Lane? And this, I think, is the real kind of key takeaway, that every project is different and has its own logistical issues, has its own operational nuances. Thame, for example, with our electrical connections, and I think I mentioned this on the previous show, we're splitting a former office into 9 flats. and each of the 3 flats, because it's kind of 3 on the ground floor, 3 on the first floor, 3 on the first floor, on the second floor, but they're segregated, and each of the sort of thirds have already a 3-phase electrical connection. So basically, that 3-phase connection is has the capacity to do 3 new individual single-phase connections, i.e. 1 for each flat. That saves us a huge amount of money. Basically, with the electrical connections at Thame, we're not digging up any roads, we're not bringing in any new cables. We are purely adapting what's already on site. That's why for Thame it's £4,200 and Colney Hatch Lane it's £19,000, because we're having to dig up a lot of the road at Colney Hatch Lane. There's lots of traffic management that's going to have to be in play. We've got a bus lane right after our site, so the bus kind of it's going to be a lot harder from a traffic management perspective. So there's more cost involved. The gas on Thame as well is far simpler. The gas runs directly in front of the property. So we're just tapping into those existing connections very, very easily, hence why the cost is £4,500. Now, Colney Hatch Lane, again, it actually is only about a 2 metre, actually it's probably about a 4 metre stretch where the new gas connections and pipes are being made from. But the issue again is that we've got traffic management. It's right on the high street. It's a busy main road. There's a bus stop near, bus lane just outside. So these are all considerations that you're going to need to factor in. And it can't just be in your development appraisal spreadsheet. It can't just be a fixed price for each utility, because each site has its own nuances. West Street, Marlow, for example, the water connections are not directly outside of the development, they are on the other side of the road. So not only are we sort of having traffic management sort of, if it was traffic management just outside our unit, it would be far easier. But because we've got to close down effectively both sides of the road at some point, there's more traffic management, and they're going to have to do things, phase the works basically. And we're also on a big T junction. So, there's going to be traffic lights and temporary traffic lights, and all of these things add up to additional costs. So we work with utilities consultants. We would always recommend doing so. It's probably the part of the delivery stage that I hate the most. It's extremely frustrating. We had 6 new connections for Sunset Court in Princess Risborough last year that took Thames Water 13 months to install. It delayed our sales. It made us lose a few sales. So these utility connections are something that I always recommend getting on top of as soon as possible. You might think, oh, you don't need to make these connections until much further into the construction phase, but in reality, it might take 5 to 6 months to actually get these connections lined up and a date in the diary for the new connection. So hopefully that's been useful. You can see the spread between it might be 9 units in one area and 9 units in another, but it could be 3 times the cost in those 3 times the cost between them. So do get your utilities consultants in early, and get quotes from those local utilities providers ASAP. Anything you wanted to mention, Jack?
Yeah, just to touch on, you mentioned a really clear point there, just to not have a fixed sum in your deal analyzer, but to bid on a site, you kind of need to until it's potentially under offer, and then you're looking at where the connections are and what that actually means for that particular site.
Yeah.
And clearly, Colney Hatch Lane is a slightly bigger project with higher value units, but utilities in London would probably be more expensive because of the traffic management and all of that goes with it. So I believe we budget anywhere between sort of 5 to 10k per unit when we're stacking a deal. Obviously you always want to base worst case, but I just thought that'd be relative to mention.
Yeah, I think like £5,000 would typically be the minimum, and if you're doing that in Thame, for example, you're getting a refund and you've over budgeted, which is a great place to be, until you start looking at the logistics of the site. I guess you can make a generalization. Like, we know that Marlow is a very constrained site. There's not really anywhere for a skip. It's right on the high street. It's on a T junction. It's a very busy road. So we know to factor in the higher end of the budget for Marlow, for example, and Colney Hatch is the same. So yeah, you just need to be a little bit conservative, I would say, with those costs. And a good utilities consultant actually will question and query the, you know, they know what they're looking for. If we were doing it ourselves, and I know for a fact on West Street, our electrical cost is now £13,500. The first quote that came through was 28. But our utilities consultant knows what he's talking about. He knows how to get the best, you know, the best price and to sort of work with the utilities provider to lower costs and reduce costs. So they're worth their weight in gold. You might spend the best part of £1,500 to £3,000 on your utilities consultant for these types of sites. But you know, that's a saving of 15 grand straight away just on the electrical connections for Marlow. So yeah, worth their weight in gold.
So they should be part of your power team, but
yeah, please don't.
Terrible joke, and we don't like the term power team either.
Very good. Cool. UKREiiF.
UKREiiF. So if you've watched our episodes, you would have seen that we went to MIPIM in March, which is, this got tagged as, I don't know who by, probably the consumers or the people that go to it, the UK version of MIPIM. Whatever that means, take it as you please. MIPIM's kind of part known for really good networking and part known for corporates having a piss up. But I will be attending UKREiiF in Leeds. Unfortunately, Ben can't make it, but we're super excited to go. I've already started building out my diary with meetings with the people that will go there. One thing that is great about UKREiiF is there is a directory, so you can actually reach out to people before the event that you've seen it going. You can filter the directory and search for an example, investment companies, banks, you know, potentially architects or whatever it may be, and you can pre-book those meetings in. As I think there's about 10,000 people going to the event, and I'm actually fortunate enough to be featuring on a round table panel on Thursday. Ben, can you bring back up the slides, because there's some details about that if anyone would like to come along. And the panel is about the role of SME developers in tackling the housing crisis. I'm guessing that's keeping up with the demand of housing, which the UK is massively off. You know, not even including birth rates, but also, you know, net immigration and things like that. But yeah, quite a macro topic, which will be fun to talk about. And I'm sure we'll be talking about the bottleneck of planning and all of these sorts of things. So it'll be good to see you there. If anyone else is listening and going to UKREiiF and would love to meet up for a coffee, do let me know. But yeah, details on the screen. So that's on the 23rd of May is when I'm doing the talk. But the actual event is Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday. So 21st, 22nd and 23rd of May. Yeah, and look forward to seeing some familiar faces. Nice, and some new ones, of course. That's why we're going up there.
Yeah, I'm a bit gutted that I can't make it. It does look like a good conference, but that's all next year.
It's also the first time I've ever been to Leeds, because anything past Oxford is north for me. So if anyone's got any recommendations for, you know, cafes, pubs, restaurants, that would also be appreciated.
You get nosebleeds going up that high.
Yeah.
So next week, it's this Thursday, the 2nd of May. I will be at the Hemel and St Albans Property Network as the expert in the corner. So I'll be taking all of my Aura Architecture banners, hopefully helping loads of people with their, you know, their maximizing space in their HMOs, helping them, you know, optimize their developments, helping them navigate some of the planning permission processes, you know, utilizing permitted development. You know, I'm sure there'll be some really niche questions that I'm asked, but I think 3 months ago when I went, there's about 110 people in the room, which is amazing. Luckily, it's like 6 minutes from my house, and this is in a place called the Beach House, which is actually a regular kind of brunch spot for me, so I know it well. But it's always a really good turnout, a real mixture of service providers, property investors, property developers, kitchen cabinet makers, you know, all sorts, but some really interesting people. If you're local, get in touch. There are tickets on Eventbrite. And if you do have any sort of burning questions from an architectural, from a planning, from an engineering perspective, I would love to help you out. So yeah, do come along. It's the Thursday, the 2nd of May, and it's every first Thursday of the month.
Cool. Article. So we've fortunately been offered the opportunity to pull together an article for the independent magazine Business Insider. And what you can actually see on the screen if you're watching is Ben and I have been doing a bit of filming in preparation, because there will be a video accompanying our well-drafted article. I don't know if we've ever written like a public article, have we?
I don't think we have, no, but I can say ChatGPT is amazing for for giving you a backbone of an article to then tweak and amend.
Yeah, so a bit of PR, which is good. Obviously, we've got our own marketing team, and we do these videos and we focus on marketing. But it's nice to see some public relations relevance coming into our business too. Obviously, we're going to spread it around and share the word when it's coming and being launched. I believe it's in June. Is that right, Ben? That it's being released?
I think it's June. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think maybe next week. I just thought of this, but in next week's episode, maybe we pick our top 6 headlines that we've written, and maybe get some crowdsourced responses of
do a vote on the title.
Jump out, the title, the headline.
Like it. To give you a bit of a flavour and to sort of sow the seed of what we're thinking along the lines of, if you have any ideas and can comment for us to bring it up for the next episode, is we're kind of thinking somewhere along the lines of property duo disrupting the property industry or something along those lines. But I'll let your minds run with it.
Nice. Good. Cool. So today we actually have our site tour, and actually a bit of a spoiler alert, I guess. And this is something we do regularly if we're busy on a Friday afternoon. If you're out with us on a Friday at 5 p.m. and wondering, how are you live on YouTube and here in front of me? Well, sometimes we do pre-record our 5 p.m. Friday lives, and that's what we're doing this week, because we're 12 till 5 o'clock this Friday today. We are actually out on site across 3 of our sites. We're going to Marlow, Thame, and then over to Abingdon to the old Maltings. I think we've got about 40 people coming with us. We're going to be talking all about the sites, how we found them, how we structured them, how we funded them, what planning permissions we've got, how we're phasing them, all of that good stuff. So do get in touch if you want to be on the list for the next site tour. We're planning on doing about 2 a year. So if you missed out on this one, it's not too late to join the next one. But this is one of the sites that we're visiting. So we're visiting St Andrew's Court in Thame. And if you're listening on the podcast, obviously you can't see what I'm looking at, and I would implore you to go over to YouTube and subscribe so you can actually see some of the properties that we're talking about. But we've been working with Oliver James of Property Branding over the last couple of weeks, and this is just a draft of the site signage and wayfinding that we are going to be installing on site in the next couple of weeks. Now, what we're trying to do with this is start to drum up a bit of a buzz, get people talking locally. We get a huge amount of footfall through the site. This image in the middle is basically straight off the high street. So we've got a kind of a gateway where there's these beautiful old sort of brick pillars as you enter the site. So we're going to be wrapping those with some signage that has the site branding, collection of stunning 1 and 2 bedroom apartments coming soon, summer 2024. And then what we've actually done is create a QR code. Because we get huge amounts of footfall even at the moment, that QR code we've got 2 people that were in discussions of buying. I don't think actually Jack knows this, but 2 people on that list are interested in buying off plan 2 of our flats. So, we haven't done any marketing. We're not going to be paying any agents for this pleasure. It's organic leads that have come into the business that are already showing interest in buying some of our flats. So we're not going to be marketing them properly until June, July this year. So we're 2 months away from that. But we're already building a buzz around the site, already gathering some leads. And that's what this site signage is all about. So we've got this big A-frame that we're looking to put in as you enter the site off the high street, busy road in front of it. So people will, stop and look at this. And then as you enter the car park, this image on the left-hand side is a big sign that kind of gives people a bit of an insight into what's to come. We're actually going to be installing a couple of big flags on each end of the site as well, just so people can see it from afar as they're driving up, start to wonder what that is, and then get a bit more information on these big signs as they get a little bit closer. I don't think it's anything that we haven't done this level of site signage before, because we haven't really worked on such a big site with such a prominent location with such good footfall. But even from putting hoarding up on our Harris fencing with this QR code, we've gained interest. So it's quite a small outlay in comparison. It starts the sales and marketing process super early, starts people talk, people start talking. And in places like this where it's a small town, that word does travel far. So yeah, we're hoping in the second week of May, we finalize these designs and we get them up on site, and we start to see a few more inquiries come in organically via this route. So yeah, super excited about that.
Just to touch on like sales and marketing generally, like using this as an example, and also our business box, which took a little while longer than we'd have hoped to let the building. But the way I always see it is, if you had a long list of every single thing you could do, from hoarding, signage, Rightmove, flyers, sticker windows, tea cozies in the local cafe shop. If you had a list of everything, it's really good to actually think you want to do as much of that list as you can and do cost benefit analysis to assess those things, rather than, oh, we'll just put it on Rightmove and and see how we get on. I think when the finance costs are racking up, you should be trying to do as much as you can, and things like these are a really good value return. And some people do buy visual. It's not just Rightmove anymore. I think there's been a transition where during COVID it was only Rightmove, but now it's going to move back to the touchy-feely stuff. We've even talked about on finishing places, even about like the smells and the scents in the rooms. Like, you want to touch on all the senses and cover as many bases as you can. And this is an example of exactly that. So we'll let you know how we get on.
Yeah, and just I know people will probably wonder, well, how much are you spending on this type of thing? This signage and Ollie, branding, the cost of the design work, we're not going to be spending much more than £3,000 on this. So it's not a significant sum of money, and these signs will be there for the next 6 months, if not longer, because we've got phase 2 and phase 3 of this site. So we've designed it in a way, I mean, this is only a draft, we've gone back with comments, but we're going to be the green banners that you see in the middle. We will also have stickers that we can overlay on those to say coming soon phase 2 in winter 2024, or phase 3 new builds coming soon in Q2 2025, that type of stuff. So we're making these kind of flexible. The site branding is there. The QR code is dynamic, so we can actually change the QR code as and when we want to. One of the other things that Ollie James is doing is creating a micro website for the site. So at the moment, the QR code just goes to a Google form that we've created to gather information and details of people that are interested. But eventually it will go to a micro website where it has all of the details about each plot, details of the agent, a little bit more on the CGIs and what the interior is going to look like, or finished photos, for example. And because it's a dynamic QR code, we can just change that anytime. And that is something that some QR codes are static, and it's it just goes to one place. Whereas make sure if you're using QR codes like this that they are dynamic, that you can actually change the URL that it goes to at a later date, so you can have complete flexibility on how that works. Internal meetings, when and why?
Yeah, so I wanted to bring this up and share it with the listeners. If you've got any people in your team or any partners, or you're growing a business, I think that there's a few things that are really important. Obviously, your role as a director or managing director is to focus on the strategy, the people, the cash, and the execution. So we're pulling up on 2 main points there, which is the people and the execution. And you're the strategy that's got to filter that down into the business. And it's sometimes you get into a busy routine where you're not actually doing any internal meetings or lack of. And, I'll hold my hand up testament to that sometimes we think, we've just got to check in and re-get on the same page and make sure that we're aligned. And I actually have this with our marketing lady in Central Suites, Jay, because sometimes she's not on the coalface of seeing what we're doing in the projects and not necessarily learning about what we're doing day to day from a marketing perspective. So it's good to just check in and make sure the broader strategy is right, and then she can go in and do the execution that she needs to. I'm not the marketing person. That's her skill set. That's her bag. I'm not saying it should be this color, not that color, to some degree. That I leave that to her, but it's all about the vision, the goals, what we're trying to achieve, and bringing on board and building a strategy that works for the business and also the person in delivery. So don't ignore having internal meetings and actually forcing yourself to spend more time in internal meetings, because that 1 hour of value that you're sharing with that employee or partner may tenfold or 1,000x over the coming 3, 6, 9 months. And that's really important. And it's also got to be in line with the strategy of the business. And with the strategy of the business, you do have to be repetitious with that and make sure that it's very clear. And also, they're not always going to want to go the same path as you to go there. So allow them to share ideas to get to that route. But it was just touching on that most really, really successful CEOs, business owners spend a lot of time in internal meetings. And in SME companies, it sometimes does get neglected. Or even startup businesses, it does sometimes get neglected. I mean, if you went into, for example, a startup company off the back of a founder running multiple startup companies, you'll be doing most of your day in sort of brainstorming internal meetings, idea flowing, strategy stuff and what that actually means. But when we set up a business, we're running around site not doing any of that. So it's just to think about what internal meetings you would potentially suggest. We in our business do a weekly team meeting in all of our businesses where we run through everything from a business perspective and a project perspective. We obviously have their staff review, and you naturally talk about strategy, people and execution in people's reviews, because you're obviously talking about what is on their job description. Is it in delivery? Are they executing it? Do they enjoy doing it? How can you help them? But then there's also ad hoc meetings that we do in our business. So if we've got an open day like today coming up, we'll just jump on a call, brainstorm, and get a quicker process of solutions that everyone's clear, everyone knows what they're doing. And what that then means is what your business looks like from the outside, it's just a lot cleaner, sharper, and understood. So I just thought that would be a good one to put in. Ben, I don't know if you've got any comments about maybe internal meetings that you do with Aura. I know you even have specific slices of management or technical or whatever it may be.
Yeah, it's a really important thing, and to be honest, it's something that I want to grow and be better at. And it comes with, as you rise up kind of higher into the business and your team grows and you're then starting to delegate and you're building a team, as you become that CEO, that managing director, like Jack says, your goal is to set the vision and give clear direction for the rest of your team, and then let them, if you've got management in place, they are a direct report into you, and then they are the ones actually disseminating that information and then going off and working with the team on a day-to-day basis. So it's really important that you give clear directions to that management level, so that they can then disseminate that across the team. One thing that I think is probably again something that I'm still learning and trying to be better at is giving very clear priorities and KPIs. It's all great of setting the vision and this is where we want to be, but if you don't then say, actually, I want this is a Q1 thing, so by the end of it's maybe it's in January and you're like, by the end of March, this is where I want to be, these are our targets. It gives the team something to hang their hat on. It's a clear direction, it's a clear goal and something for them to aim for, and it's also a clear thing that you can judge performance on. So if you've set clear direction and clear KPIs, if the time comes and that 3-month period is over and you look at it and you're like, well, we've not even reached 25% of this level, like what's going on, what do we need to do differently, or are you the right person in the business to be doing that? So unless you've got clear KPIs, clear performance indicators, you're going to be giving fluffy information to your team. So just make sure that they've got a priority list and they know what's more important than something else, and then they've got some clear KPIs to attack, and really it helps them and it helps you and it helps the business.
A little bit of a rabbit hole. You're talking about clear KPIs and clear communication. I love percentages or ratios. I can walk into our surveyor's room and be like, how are you getting on with that survey? And they'd say, good. And I'll be like, when do you think it'll be finished? And they'll say, a few more hours. but the second question is where I actually get the answer, and I quite frequently do that, like what percentage is it finished, because you don't actually then know, and that's a prime example for for anything. If you have a team member that's gone out on a project and done X, Y, and Z, and you say, how was it? And they say good, and you could go rate it out of 10. And then they could go, well, it was a 6 out of 10. You could go, well, how can we think about making that an 8 out of 10 for the next go? Obviously, we want to be 10 out of 10, but give it level of progression and growth, but also to quantify the clear communication.
Yeah, one thing brings me on to something else, and that's, we've made not some errors, but we've tested a few things out in the past where there is a balance with how many internal meetings that you had. With Aura, we did take it too far, where every morning, and we kind of took this from Apple. So in Apple stores, every single morning they have 20 minutes of training, and that's in every store, in every Apple store, for customer service, to understand the tech, to improve people's ability to communicate with their clients. And we thought, okay, that's a great idea. And we were bringing in kind of what we called sort of daily stand-ups. So I think 9 till 9:30 every morning, it was a case of everyone getting together. What's everyone working on? What problems are people having? How are they overcoming it? But that was just becoming too much. When we were looking at and this is again something we track, it's the efficiency of your team. So if you know that 85% of my architectural team should be people should be fee earning for 85% of their time, and the rest of the other 15% is administration, internal meetings, all those things that go on top of it. And different people might have a different efficiency rate. If I know that I've got a senior architect that does a lot of fee proposals, goes on a lot of consultant meetings with clients, their actual fee earning efficiency is going to be less than somebody that's purely a part 2 architect that's there to just get drawings done and out the door. Their efficiency might be 95%. So understanding that as well, and having a balance between efficiency within the team and internal meetings is also quite crucial. Cool, good stuff. What we got next? Heritage assets. So yeah, yesterday I had the pleasure of spending a couple of hours with Brendan Quinn at the Central London Property Network. I'd say there were about 45, 50 people in the room, which was great. I'm going to share my screen as well. So we just, if you haven't been to one of Brendan's events, they're really great. There's such a wide mix of people in the room. We did a talk on myself and Claire Truman, who's a heritage architect, conservation architect, did a chat on heritage. And then we had a development panel, which was chaired by Will Mannard, all about, the issues in planning, PD, development finance. We had somebody from a RFB legal talking about legal issues, Claire from a heritage perspective, Sam Lowney from Mary Oaks Finance talking about development finance and bridging loans, myself, and then Peter Higginbottom from Planning Insight, who's a planning consultant. It's always a great networking event. Yesterday was a very special event because it was the 14th year anniversary. So Brendan's been holding these events for 14 years, which is absolutely incredible, and always gets a really good turnout. So yeah, message us if you want a link to next month's meeting. It's one of our good friends, Stuart Wyeth, who is converting a lot of banks into residential homes at the moment, and he's got about £20 million worth of GDV in the pipeline. Absolutely top bloke. And yeah, do get in touch if you want tickets for next month. But I did a 20-minute presentation, just a bit about kind of Heritage Assets 101, a little bit of a CPD on what they are. I'm not going to do a full 20 minutes now. I just wanted to talk through some of the key issues. So when you're working with heritage assets, you're most likely going to be in a conservation area, and these are dotted all over London, all over the UK really. So little pockets of town centres that maybe in 200 years ago it sort of started as the main high street, and then the town has kind of evolved around that. But obviously, what the government are trying to do is keep the beauty of and preserve the character of those types of areas. So conservation area is an area of special architectural or historic interest, the character of which it is desirable to preserve or enhance. And this image of the George of Stamford is very important, because Stamford was the very first conservation area in the UK. And then you can see on this image on the screen, these dotted properties that are in green. These are all listed buildings, and listed buildings are buildings and structures defined by the Secretary of State as being of special architectural or historic interest. Now, the Secretary of State thing here is very important, because fundamentally, if you do works to listed buildings that you haven't got permission for, it is a criminal offence. You can go to jail if you do works that are deemed, unlawful, and you haven't got the correct permissions from the council, from the listed building officer, to do them on listed buildings. Listed buildings come in different types. So Big Ben is on the screen. That is a grade 1 building of exceptional interest, and only 2.5% of listed buildings are grade 1 listed. 5.8% of listed buildings are grade 2 star. And these are particularly important buildings of more than special interest. And then what you most commonly see is a grade 2 listed building, which is the rest of the 91.7% of listed buildings are grade 2. And these are just buildings that are of special interest. Some things that we've worked on in the past, and what isn't on this list, is actually locally listed buildings. Now, we've just got planning approval on a locally listed building in West Drayton. It just means that it's not of special character enough to kind of meet the Heritage England, Historic England database, but it just means that the council have earmarked it as of local historic interest, basically. So the conservation officers, the planning officers, are going to still look at those locally listed assets with a little bit more interest than necessarily a building that isn't listed or in a conservation area. And these two decision notices on the screen look very similar, but for those of you that are beady-eyed, you'll notice that one says full planning permission and one says application for listed building consent. And what I really wanted to get across here is that they are two different things. When you're working on a listed building and you're making changes that are, external, or you're changing use, etc., yes, you need full planning permission, just like you would on any other scheme, but you also need listed building consent. And they're two separate things, two separate applications, but they do run along, in tandem. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but these are the very, very quickly, the sort of things that you can expect. And I pulled out one of our previous decision notices where it really hopefully drums home the level of scrutiny that the listed building officers and conservation officers are going to look at when you're working on heritage buildings. No timber panels or structural timbers can be cut. This includes chasing of timbers to facilitate service runs. So your plumbers and your electricians can't go drilling holes through the original structural floor joist like they would in any other building. Brickwork and any other fabric that you're changing in the building has to match the existing original fabric. So you can't use cement-based render. You have to use lime render, lime mortar. All of that has to be done as if it was done 100 years ago when the building was originally built. You should be providing 1 to 10 typical details. So even if you're trying to remove architraves, remove skirting boards, you can't do that unless you get the approval from the listed building officer. So providing 1 to 10 scale drawings early on in that process as part of the planning approval and the listed building consent is going to save you loads of time later, because if you get the planning approval and the listed building consent through, that's all great. But if the council are slapping these planning conditions on and you've got a list as long as your arm of planning conditions to discharge, it's going to take you another 3 or 4 months to get those discharged and you can't start on site. So the more information you can do with your original planning application and listed building application, the faster it's going to be actually afterwards. And then this is a really key thing. You'll see on the screen 2 different types of Velux windows. The one on the right is a conservation roof window. And you think, they're conservation windows. That's what I need to use in my listed building, for example. But more often than not, the council will want them to be heritage conservation roof windows, which means they're flush with the roof slope, which you can see on this left-hand image. So Velux do two options: heritage conservation roof window and just a conservation roof window. And most of the time they're going to want the heritage one because it's more slimline. It is flush with the roof slope. And that is something that people often get caught out on. So just some top tips: use the Historic England website to have a look at the history of the listed building that you're going to be working on or buying. It just helps you because it will say on the Historic England website exactly what's listed in the building. Although it's still going to come under scrutiny for the whole building, you know that if it's mainly the facade and you've got a portico entrance or some lovely brickwork or some stonework that is what they're basically listing the property for, that they're going to be more there's going to be more scrutiny if you're trying to change those parts of the building because they're on the Historic England website and exactly break down why it's listed. Definitely add 20-25% contingency on costs, and Jack's going through this at the moment with one of his grade 2 listed buildings. You do have to have deep pockets when working in listed buildings, so just make sure you've got the contingency for it. Allow extra time to get all of these planning conditions signed off, to get the listed building officer out on site if there are any issues. So just make sure you allow extra time. Get a building survey from the likes of someone like Claire Truman, who's a heritage architect, to get their input on what can and can't be done very early, and then submit the 1 to 10 details that I mentioned earlier with your planning and listed building application, so that you're saving time in the long run. And finally, use the right roof lights. Hopefully that's been a little bit of a whistle-stop tour into what heritage assets are, what a listed building is, what conservation areas are. Don't be afraid of working on them and buying grade 2 listed buildings. They are beautiful things, and it's great. It's a great feeling when you've revitalized a building and brought it back to useful life that's just might have been in disrepair for a long time. But you are basically a custodian of that property when you buy it. There are legal things that you need to abide by, so just make sure you're bringing the right team in to actually to work on them with you.
Also, just because, as Ben mentioned, we're going through a project at the moment which is being very challenging and has additional costs and delays. There are communities out there, so you can pay to be part of a listed building community who then have a helpline that you can call with your questions and queries to help you with a project if you're taking on a listed building. And also, one thing I read up on the other day is, as Ben mentioned, it's a criminal offence to do anything to a building that does its existing fabric any injustice of what it prehistorically was. And when you take over ownership of the property, you're technically responsible for that. So there's also indemnity insurances to protect yourself from before. And what I would say to do is make sure you take plenty of photos so that you can show that within your ownership, if something was done that was dodgy, that it's not your responsibility.
Yeah, that was actually one of the questions that came up last night, and you're right. If you're buying a listed building and you buy it and you find out that they've removed 400-year-old timber joists and reinstalled it with steelwork, or knocked down one of the lath and plaster walls that's 200 years old, for example, it is your responsibility. You are legally it's not the old owner that is responsible. You can't, like Jack says, get indemnity kind of against it, but it does become your responsibility. As soon as you own that asset, you are the custodian of that property, and it's your responsibility to maintain it and upkeep it.
Then a question I had, which while I was reading it, I was thinking this. How does the liability sit with his limited company?
If you're buying it in limited company?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess you're a director of that limited company. So ultimately, you're the last port of call. Your balls are on the block, I guess.
Interesting. Yeah. Hopefully, it's a heritage block. On to finance on that sweet note. So I was working through our spreadsheet the other day, and similar to what we were discussing about utilities, you've got to put some figures in your spreadsheet to kind of get moving. And if you're watching on video, I'll talk you through the numbers on the screen so that the podcast listeners can hear as well. But the long and short, there's rules of thumbs that we use within our lending, and that's across the capital stack. So the capital stack is 100% of the costs that go into a project. And that can be sliced up in all manner of ways. You could buy it in cash, develop in cash and sell, which means that 100% of your capital stack is cash. You can then also have first charge development lending, bridge lending, refurbishment products, buy-to-let products that tend to go up to a rule of thumb 70 to 75% loan to value. You then have products, that particular product, whether it's a development facility, they also try and stay below 85% loan to cost. So 75% loan to value, 85% loan to cost. The difference is your costs roll through the project, because once you start on a project, the value is going to change and flip to loan to gross development value because it's a development. And they will try and stay under 65% loan to gross development value. But some sort of tips that I wanted to put in here is you kind of got to have numbers to put in your spreadsheet to get something going, so that when you do pull together a bid on a site and get a bid out, you can then go and get terms thereafter. Because I don't always recommend that you get terms from a lender just to put a bid out if you're bidding on a particular site. So some rules of thumbs that we use with development and bridging finance, we factor in 2% arrangement, 10% per annum, and 1% exit fee. We also normally stipulate that about 50% of the purchase price is going to be roughly, as a rule of thumb, what the amount of equity that needs to be raised. Once we get into our more comprehensive spreadsheet, we actually work out the loan to values, minus it off the deposit of the purchase of the property, and then the equity position is that deposit plus all your cost to buy it, so stamp duty, legals, etc. Then your first phase of build, because you will draw down that funding in arrears. So it's just a useful exercise for you to spend. I always say to our team, and even to myself, spend that time sharpening that axe, so that when you come to chop the tree down, it's quicker, and you can chop multiple trees down. And that's what I'm talking about, my spreadsheet. The more time you're making it a smarter, sort of fluid spreadsheet that communicates with itself and has cells that automatically put figures in, the easier it's going to make your life. So, and the quicker it's going to make to stack deals. And that can sometimes be the difference to you getting through 10 deals that week or 5 deals that week. And the 5 that you didn't bid on, I guess it probably one of the 5 that you should have been buying anyway. So have a little think about how your finance part is structured on your stack, just to get things going and try and make it as accurate as possible. When you do get a few offers out or buy a site and get terms back from a lender, we normally go market wide for lending. So I can kind of see what types of terms are out there. I'll then go back to my finance box and make sure that it's accurate. But just some little tips to integrate into your spreadsheet. And we can actually share our finance comparison calculator. If you would like to be that shared, just comment in the message box and we'll get that over to you. Cool.
Nice. Sorry, I lost you a bit there. It's I think my signal's been pretty bad, but cool. Point number 9. So what to discuss when entering a JV? This is something we've worked a lot on over the last couple of years. Like I mentioned, we've raised £14 million in finance through investment partners. So we've done our fair share of JV agreements and deeds of priorities and facility agreements and all that good stuff. So just wanted to talk through some of the things that you should look out for and make sure you have in those JV agreements. And one of the key things is thinking about actually what could go wrong. And when you're starting a joint venture, it's all very, everyone's very positive and optimistic about the future and what's going to happen. But it's really, really key to make sure that you think about every eventuality. If things go wrong down the way and what actually happens, who steps in, if you need more money, who's bringing that extra money? Is it a case of your investor brings the extra money, or you have to go externally for more funding, but maybe it dilutes the shareholding because somebody else has to bring money in and get a piece of the pie? And there's some other key things that we wanted to bring up. So one of the things is how the sort of waterfall structure at the tail end works. And what I mean by that is in most of our joint ventures, the structure, once all the project has been sold, will go something like this. You'll have money coming in as you sell each unit that pays down your senior debt lender. After the senior debt lender has been paid off, there might be some extra costs that need paying within the business. So, you know, any final kind of invoicing from consultants or anything like that. What would normally happen then is your investor that's come in as part of your JV partnership, their finance goes into the business as a loan typically, and then their loan will be the next thing that then gets paid off. And then there'll be a profit share based on the shareholding after that. So kind of senior bank lender, then all of any extra costs, then your investment loan gets paid back, and then you distribute profits. But there's various ways that these things can be set up, and it will actually also depend on whether you're selling the assets, whether you're holding the assets. Anything else that you wanted to?
Yeah, just wanted to touch on. So Ben's talked about the waterfall pre-arranged, then post-project payment pay down structure. A few P's in there. But I just wanted to touch on like various different ways that can be structured. And you know, Ben mentioned the monies goes in as a loan, and that can be structured in very many different ways. The most typical way that Ben and I structure our joint venture deals is the loan goes in as an interest-free loan. We then deliver the project, but the loan gets paid back in full, and then the profit share is the return for the investor. Now, we have our own internal metrics. Even at the point of me bidding on a site, I'm already working out the return on the investor's money, because I know that to secure this project, we're going to need funding. And if it's not that attractive return on capital, we're probably not going to be doing the deal. So we tend to work on that structure, but there's other ways which are slightly more corporate as a focus. There's other ways that we work, which is where someone loans in the money and we give them an interest rate. That is not a JV. That's just a straight loan. That's a loan investment, probably on a second charge on the deal. But the other two ways that it can be structured, that's like the straightforward 0% loan in that's a profit share, is there's a hurdle rate, which is similar, but the capital that goes in has a hurdle. So let's say that's, for an example, 10% on the money. If the project overperforms that and produces 10% and more, once that hurdle has been hit, then it defers to the shareholders agreement, which is a split in the profit, and whatever that split is, that's a hurdle rate. And then the last but not least, which is also quite common, is preferred equity, aka in the financial industry, pref equity, which is similar to the hurdle, but it has to go to the pref equity provider. So let's use the same example. A 10% pref equity position goes to the JV partner, the investor first, and then the profit split thereafter. So it's a fixed metric. So a hurdle is a moving metric. You can supersede it and revert to a different option. But I just thought it would be useful to explain the different ways to be set up. If you're a good developer, you should be able to agree your projects as you know, the person coming in is bringing the funds and you're everything else. You're the expertise, you're the delivery, you're the finding, you're the actual time that goes into it. And that's how we do our own deals internally too. So that's the predominant way that I've heard a lot of developers like us and what we prefer to do. Because essentially the risk for an investor is that a hurdle isn't hit or a rate isn't hit, but they get the, probably bigger chunk of the upside. And also speaking on behalf of XP Property, we're kind of more interested in deal 5, deal 10 with these individuals. So we're not going to be, doing our best to ensure that they get a good return and can come back and work with us again. And that's quite a key element of how we structure our deals. Good.
Nice. Very good. So I mentioned Thame earlier. It's one of the sites that we're visiting today. We got an external works planning application approved last week to get balconies and terraces and gardens. And I just wanted to talk about what is happening next, because we had a meeting yesterday morning with Fiducium, who are our lender on this, about how we can recapitalize for the next phase and how that sort of chunk of new development finance comes into the site. So you'll see a plan on screen. This is the ground floor plan, and I put that on there basically to give you a bit of a visual of what we're doing, so you can see kind of how we're moving things around on site. So that right hand sort of chunk of building is actually currently tenanted by a company called Affinity Trust. They're a sort of housing provider, very strong covenant. And one of the things that came up in Brendan's development panel last night that I answered was actually, you know, people were talking about using PD and converting commercial to resi, and that's the in word, and that's what people want to do. And that's great, and that can add huge amounts of value, and it is what we're doing here. But sometimes actually it makes sense to keep commercial. You know, we've re-geared the leases on this. So the current tenants, I think, we're on about £14 a square foot. You know, we're now at about 18.5, 19 pounds a square foot. You know, a big increase, you know, 30% increase on the rental income. 30% increase on the value of those tenants and the assets that they're staying in. So it made sense. One of the other key considerations was that one of the tenants, the accountant, is in the inside the act, so the Landlord and Tenant Act, which makes it a lot harder to remove a tenant that's in that. But Affinity Trust, you know, it's their main HQ. They've been here for 15 years. They didn't really want to move. So we opened a conversation with them when we bought the property to actually say, look, you know, what can you pay us to actually stay on site? And they were keen to do so. So we've agreed a term with them. They're going to be moving from that right-hand side chunk of block into the left-hand side, which is the main road. So they're quite well segregated from the residential element of the property. And then you'll see the green square in the middle, which is the 9 units that we're currently delivering. So that left-hand side of the building will be commercial, and we've re-geared the leases onto 10 and 15-year leases. So really strong covenant. We've got loads of options with that now. We can either refinance and release a chunk of money to pay down our expensive dev finance and just put them on a term mortgage product, or we could actually sell those commercial properties. You know, it's a relatively strong yield. Really strong and secure tenants that are now at the start of a much longer lease. So we've got a bit of flexibility there. The chunk of the building on the right-hand side where Affinity Trust are moving out of, we will actually be submitting, actually hopefully today, a Class MA PD prior approval application to get a further 11 flats out of that side of the building. Again, huge amounts of added value. And that will form phase 2 of our process. We did a deep dive on this project. It's episode 37. So season 1, episode 37. If you want to know, you know, more about how that process has worked, it may have actually evolved since then, because this was 6 months ago, and things do kind of move fast on site. But I think the strategy then would have been very, very similar to what I've just discussed. But yeah, huge amounts of value being added to that project, and phase 2 will start basically in the next 3 months once we got the planning approvals through.
I think it's quite normal for us, Ben, to always think about how we can phase something, and I don't know if others do that. You know, St Helens Mill, double award-winning deal that we did, phasing. Hyde End Road, phased it through COVID, which actually kind of salvaged the profitability of the deal. This deal, I think, is going to be, you know, probably from a gross profit on margin, a percentage on gross profit, probably not necessarily that. Well, it's going to be in the top 3 of our deals, but because it's such a big deal that the actual lump revenue sum is the highest. So probably one of our best deals is what I'm getting at. Went round there a really weird way. And again, we're phasing it. You know, maybe it's something you guys think of. If you're struggling to make a deal work, can you phase it? Can you take rent roll on part and do another part? Or, you know, that's how we think and look at I think pretty much all of our sites have got some form of phasing in it at some point. And just to explain for listeners what phasing actually is. So this building we're converting to apartments by most part, but we're keeping some of the commercial. And then we're also looking at new build in the car park. But we're not emptying and vacating the whole building all at one time and waiting for consent for all of it. We're phasing it through while we take rent roll and de-risk the next part. And if we end up building the new build houses in 6 years, that doesn't bother me, because it will make the return on the deal better now and then. So we're kind of patient with how we go about tackling the site, obviously considering finance costs and things like that.
That did come up last night, and you know, I was saying to Sam Lowney from Merry Oaks, the finance broker, some lenders hate us because they just want a vanilla, you know, greenfield site where they've, you know, got planning approval to build 20 houses and off we go. Most of our sites have a creative element to it like this, whereby yeah, we are kind of thinking about the phases. We're thinking about how we can add value, you know, basically where we think we might get with even phase 1 and moving the commercial tenants across is that on sale of those 9 units and refinance or sale of the commercial unit, we should actually be able to pay down our investment partner on this project and have the rest of the site almost kind of free. And that's, you know, that's come about because of the phasing and the way we've structured it, and the fact that we've got, I don't know the exact figures actually off the top of my head, but you know, the best part of 70,000-80,000 pounds in income coming in all the time. We're going through this planning process and developing the 9 units because we've got the existing tenants on site. So that's, you know, that's pretty much covering our costs.
Yeah, I think the gross rent on this, I think the gross rent on this for the delivery of the project is well in excess of 100 grand.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Once we've re-geared everything, absolutely. Q&A. If you've enjoyed this and you've got any questions in your own business, you know, that's what we're here for. So do drop comments in down below. DM us if you've got something specific and you want to discuss it, and we can bring it up on next week's episode. I'm conscious that I still haven't answered the question from 2 weeks ago because it has been an absolutely mad couple of weeks. We'll try and get around to that pretty soon. Anything else you want to say, Jack?
Yeah, just note for Christina, remind Ben before the end of next week. And no, not in particular. Look forward to seeing everyone on our site day to day. Make sure you bring your cameras, your questions, and your hungry stomachs. It's going to be a good day out. I know we've got a lot of people that have RSVP'd, and if you haven't booked onto today's open tour day, just comment tour day, next tour day dates or something like that, and we will come back to you with when that will be. And that's it. Hope everyone has a good weekend.
Cheers, everyone. Bye now.